Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom, a novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 34: The Hut and the Vegetable Pond. Pulau Besar, Malaysia. Walking on the hard surface of the land after having been on water for a week was a strange sensation at first. Trin felt the earth moving in waves as if she was still at sea and about ready to fall when on her feet for the first few days on shore. Hey, do you feel the earth moving? Trin asked Luke, giggling at the strange feeling. Yeah, it's weird. Luke extended his arms sideways, as if trying to balance himself walking on a tightrope. It's as if we're still on water, Kim joined in. Yeah, it's really funny. I have to lift my feet up one step after another and place them down carefully on the ground with each step, Juan added. Like a robot, Luke laughed. Then they reached the hut and entered it in silence. The children tried to stay calm, even though their excitement was shown clearly on their faces. Their eyes twinkled, and their noses twitched like rabbits about to enter a den full of lettuce. The primitive thatched and timbered hut was given to the family for a minimal amount of bartered exchange from the previous occupants. The average period for boat people to wait for a permanent settlement in the third country was 3 months at that time. However, there were many who had to wait for years and years if encountering complications with their application. Without any means to purchase a private hut, each new arrival or family shared an area in the large common one, which was built by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, with other families. By having some cash for a private hut, the individual family was better off than the rest. They had more privacy, of course, the sacred privacy that the refugee longed to have after having none back home. There were about 20 common huts and at least 500 individual ones scattered around the island. Those who had come earlier had built their huts nearer to the beach, and later arrivals had to go further inland. Some families with enough manpower and skills, and who owned their boats, had dismantled and used the planks and timbers from the boats to build their own huts. Some had the cash to purchase raw materials to start from scratch. With a stroke of luck, Trin's parents had known the previous occupants of this hut, and they left it to them for a minimal amount when departing for settlement in the United States. They only had to stay in the common hut for a day and then move to their own hut the very next day. It was one of the few huts built by the earliest groups to arrive. Being on a corner of the main pathway leading to the front beach, the family had the advantage of hearing gossip from people walking by. It was only 6 by 10 meters in dimension. There were 2 large timbered platforms built along the length of the hut, used as common dormitories for the male and female members separately. They did not have many belongings, except some bamboo-woven bags of clothes and some kitchen utensils that were used on the boat. Juan and Luke dragged the bags along and put them on the dirt floor in the kitchen. The simple open-air kitchen was right at the back of the hut. On the log bench was a 3-point makeshift stove. Once more, they had to use wood stoves here. Back to primitive life, folks, Juan declared grandly, looking about him. Hey, I thought we'd said goodbye to wood stoves and wood smoke for good, Drin exclaimed, eyeing the kitchen. Faint chance that happening. Here we are again, Kim said, and they burst out laughing despite the circumstances. It was a good, humorous laugh that showed their true happiness, and it jingled in the simple thatched hut like Santa's bells at Christmas, unlike their black humor back home. Never mind about that. I'm happy. We're here. Yippee! Drin declared and giggled happily. She almost toppled over when she tried to inspect the stove, still wavering from her steps. Yeah, we are free, Vi agreed. She was the quietest sister in the brood, and her statement always carried substantial weight for the whole group. We're here and we're happy and free as a refugee, Juan sang aloud in his silly tune. Yeah, happy and free as a refugee, Luke chanted after his brother, and then the boys started locking arms and dancing in a circle. Oh, shut up, silly boys, Kim admonished, but she laughed merrily at the same time. They giggled, laughed, sang, and danced. Then the lot of them ran excitedly to the back of the hut and walked around, checking out the neighborhood. It was strange that they had ended up in this place so far away from home. After a week's journey at sea, arriving on the island was still a dream to them. It was land at last. Nothing could describe their relief as the boat approached land. Nothing could be more precious than seeing something apart from the sea after a week or two of floating aimlessly. They were still nowhere. It was not their final destination, but the journey had almost ended. They had reached land safely at last. Now the family even had a hut to stay in. Hi, Trin nodded to her neighbors opposite. There are so many kids in that house. There are more kids than ours, Trin whispered to Luke. There are 100 of them, Luke agreed. 50 boys and 50 girls. And they giggled together over their silliness. Their happiness lingered on for many days afterward, and they laughed about everything while settling in the camp. Outside the hut, leaning against the thatched partition and facing the path, was a small rectangular logged table with seating for 6 and 2 connecting benches on both sides, also made of logs. They used to sit around that table and talked about everything happening in their life during this transitional time. But the most wonderful possession they had in the refugee camp was a vegetable pond. Look, we even have a vegetable pond. Walking around the perimeters of the pond and looking down into the green shoots below, they were amazed at seeing the familiar bok choy vegetable from back home. How cool is that? Luke was counting the steps, trying to measure the size of the pond. They had inherited a 2 by 3 meter bok choy pond from the previous occupants as well. It was dug down a step to collect water and turn the ground into a muddy patch and situated further towards the back of the hut. For many days afterward, they realized that was a real luxury in camp, a real treat, a vegetable pond that the family was able to use as a source of greens was a godsend, as the refugees had hardly any vegetable supplies. Some of them had to venture out into the woods to look for edible greens to supplement their main diet of canned food and instant noodles. The bok choy garden thrived on, soaking up recycled running water from the kitchen and a shower cubicle. Water from the washing up, from the washing, from showering, and from all the family's use was drained through a small trench leading to the pond. Regardless of the unhygienic practice of using recycled water for their pond, they were grateful for its produce. The pond was a miracle, a wonderful dream. It kept regrowing endlessly with new shoots of bok choy throughout their stay at the camp. The more they cut the stems and the leaves, the faster the shoots regrew. The family was never short of vegetables in their meals. They all called it our incredible and miraculous vegetable pond. To add variety, Mother also planted some other greens collected from her walks in the bush and forced the children to eat them as a fresh salad in homemade organic vinegar from fermented ripe bananas. They were Peperomia pellucida, or pepper elder, with shiny, fleshy, heart-shaped tiny leaves. Dren often chewed them tentatively, then spat out the weird-looking greens with their hairy tentacles along the stems when Mother was not looking. Even with her mother's forceful statement, "Eat these, they're good for you, they make you grow taller." "Supplies, supplies, food is coming," Luke yelled at the top of his lungs, running back from the beach. They had supplies of sardines or tuna cans, instant noodles, flour, sugar, salt, soy sauce, fish sauce, MSG as their main food. Fresh fish and meat were occasional treats. The coming of the supply boat always brought happiness, an event that heralded guaranteed joy rather than the approach of other refugee boats that might bring shocking news to the camps. It's your turn to queue for supplies, Juan. Even though they still had to stand in line for food, they knew that it was only temporary, and that cut all anxiety and weariness down to nothing. It's no use trying to get out of it this time, soldier, Drin commanded with feigned authority. Curiously, to Trin, the 3-month period in the refugee camp was the happiest one in her life. Primitive as their living conditions were, they had their freedom. Sitting around in a circle, with or without a guitar, they could stay singing and talking into the night with other refugees, debating about anything that they could not freely discuss before. They often joked about the term they used to do their business regularly every morning. Have you been to Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum yet? They would laugh hysterically at the childish joke, satisfying their childish revenge. Friendships and romance were rapidly formed in the camp overnight and ended rapidly as one party might be accepted by the Americans and the other by the Australian embassy. And so separation or heartbreak was often heard about. There were crimes of burglaries, robberies, and rapes. Murders and stabbings happened between jealous parties and over power struggles. There were babies born with happiness, but there were also babies born with heartache as the result of encounters with Thai pirates. Overall, a refugee camp was a mini country governed by volunteers who came and went at intervals, and typically was at times quiet and peaceful, but at other times chaotic and full of turbulence, and as unpredictable as the sea. The boat people would be screened at first by UNHCR, which recorded their name, date of birth, and fingerprints before giving them the refugee status. Then each family or adult was given an application form to fill in the country of their first choice. Then they all had to wait in turn for being interviewed by the immigration officer. There were successful applicants, but there were also a number of rejected cases, and so the waiting period in between having been accepted or not at all was incredibly terrifying. Yang and Kate were already in Sydney a year ago. They were all trying to apply for Australia as their final settlement. Drin's family was divided into 5 units. Her parents, Drin and Luke, were in one, as the children were under 18. The other adults, Mac, V, Juan, and Kim, were separate as individuals. They were all very anxious about being rejected and divided, but hoped for the best as always. The United States of America was the safety net for all who were not accepted anywhere else. Good old USA, which offered the door to those poor refugees as the last resource. Drin remembered the Australian immigration officers were always wearing shorts and casual clothes when visiting the camp, unlike others. They laughed when Drin answered their question. "What do you know about Australia?" "Kangaroos in the Opera House," Drin declared, feeling very clever at that time. The sea, the beach, the sun, the hut, the bush, the crimes, the romances, the tragedies, the heartaches, and the frequent trips to Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum in the bush with at least 2 or 3 companions for safety reasons were unfading memories for the refugees, even if they were later to become a governor or a nuclear physicist. It goes with the saying, once a refugee is enough for one's whole lifetime.